Yes, mate. You feeling good?
Yeah. It's good to do the walk
Yeah.
first, yeah. Just kind of arrive and reset.
It was actually a gorgeous day.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Welcome, Pete.
Good to be here.
So you like the walk?
Oh, so beautiful. I mean, I was here in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Different now to the summer. Your deer have been busy.
Yeah, munching up the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really nice to be back. I mean, I came with our kids, obviously, and
Yeah.
it's already feels like a special place to them.
Oh, that's nice.
They talk about it, you know.
Well, it was a special day. It was a wedding party, wedding festival.
Yeah.
And you
Will
came
you
on
have us
force.
back in the summer? Can we bring the kids back in the summer?
Oh, 100%.
We'll work for our supper, you know.
You did plenty last time. Especially the kids. They must work hard.
Yes. Oh, I was talking about the kids, yeah.
There's no fun or play to be had here.
No. For us, maybe.
Pete Josef, if that is your real name.
Joseph is my middle name. Yeah, but we're a long line of Josephs.
So that is your real name.
Definitely on my Dutch, so I have a Dutch lineage on one side, and then I guess a very British on the other side. I haven't been back through the annals of time. What's it, ancestry, that ancestry site. But yeah, as far as I know.
It's got real meaning for you.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back on slightly different basis today to get involved in a conversation that I've given you the headline on, but other than that, you're just a very chill man. You're just willing to come with the vibes and go for a walk and see what we're going to talk about. And I like it that way. I like not pre-scripting and pre-deciding how it's all going to go and then doing it on camera. I prefer to have a real genuine moment together. And I've given you a little heads up that there's a few different modes that will hopefully wander throughout this next period of time. But hoping to pick your brains on some bits and bobs and just see what comes up between us, really. And you won't have seen anything other than the trailer because the first episode is not yet published. But I've devised this very prototypical game. Really simple, but the idea is just to try and see if the pretty random stuff on these cards, just sit with it once you pick three and see if something comes to your mind, a moment, something small. Ideally not one of your hero stories from your life. See if it just makes you think of something. And with my dad, who we spoke with last time, it was a couple of links away from what was on the cards that ended up being the little thing he spoke about. So it's just a way of getting into who you are in a slightly different way, an unexpected way, even for you. So
Cool. I'm up for it.
Yeah, good. So there's two kinds of cards. There's 8 number cards and 8 inspiration cards, kind of shape and colour. And so you can pick 3 of either all time or all inspiration or a mixture of both. So you've got 2 beauty, shape, art, nature, that kind of vibe, and 1 on the science side. Just quickly, what drew you to them before we flip them over and see what comes up?
I guess we've spoken a bit about the power of music to heal. And I guess the part of it that I don't know so much about is the science. So I'm hoping, I don't know.
I like
we
that.
could help each other out on that, possibly.
Yeah.
Beauty is something I think probably that I'm maybe subconsciously often preoccupied by in my music and my music making. Nature writing is something I seem to do naturally. I deliberately didn't choose Justice because it's such a poignant thing for me right now, and we were talking about a new song that's coming up for me, which is about exactly that, and it's about freedom, I suppose, liberties, all those kind of things. And if I disappear down that rabbit hole,
we might not come out for 3 hours.
We might not come out, yeah.
So when you flip them over, just sit with it for a second, as long as you like, until something pops into your mind, and then tell us about it.
So we've got 1,000,000, and then we've got what looks like ocean waves, although it also looks a bit like sound waves. And then this interesting thing, which kind of looks like a butterfly, but I don't know. It also looks a bit like a coat of arms or something.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm thinking vastness about particularly, well, both these two cards, a huge number and a huge thing in the ocean, which is something I feel like we're learning a lot more about the ocean. This represents, at the moment, I'm seeing a literal butterfly, a tiny thing in nature.
I like that you're drawn.
So vastness and a tiny thing within the vastness, I suppose.
If you sit with it, is there any kind of moment or memory that with those themes or the pictures or indeed the words on the other side, any of it that sort of leads you to, that tells us a bit about a moment in your life?
Not so much a moment in my life, as I guess I'm just a moment right now. And it only just came as you were talking then, and it was about the precariousness of people, of migration, actually, and the ocean for a second. Then suddenly I'm thinking about crossing an ocean, you know. Definitely something I find myself drawn to. Those kind of themes increasingly in my life about just what's going on and the plight of other people, perhaps that are, you know, going through the kind of migration of. I mean, we're told that there's this, you know, mass migration is going to be a big part of our future, but possibly our near future. So yeah,
amazing.
I did just have another memory of me and my brothers on a pedalo in France.
Oh, go on.
Which I don't think I've thought about for years.
That's the idea.
Yeah. It was in France. Yeah, it was in Brittany. We'd hired a pedalo. Only in the 80s could this happen.
Were you 10? Were you 5?
I would have been, probably pre-10.
Oh, wow,
My brother was probably maybe just about secondary school, I suppose, my older brother, and then my younger brother. Yeah, so probably kind of 9, 7 and 11 or something.
And were you a good team at that time, or is there fear of capsize and being chucked overboard?
Oh, no, it was argued. The whole thing was a big argument. But yeah, funny how the 80s was just such a different. There was no health and safety. Yeah, on the same trip, I remember being sent off on a horse, you know, with a guide and falling off the horse. I got dragged along actually by the stirrups of this horse.
No helmet.
This gravel. Yeah, no helmet, no safety. But this pedalo, they were just like, yeah, you go off. We end up miles out at sea, you know, in this pedalo.
Oh, a sea pedalo. Sorry, I hadn't quite clocked that. Yeah, I mean, that's a different gravy, because I did it growing up in Cardiff in Roath Park at this little, small lake, big pond. And that had its own risks in the 80s, but not quite the same as setting sail to America or whatever.
Yeah. Just get taken by a current and you're like somewhere completely different. Yeah.
Was that typical though, growing up with you boys? Was it a lot of adventures and stuff like that, or was that an unusual spot?
Yeah, a lot of scrapes, adventures, kind of typical stuff, boy stuff, and particularly with my younger brother. Yeah, lots of that kind of stuff. I think my older brother was probably a bit more sensible. He was definitely more studious. We were, me and Mark, my younger brother, were a bit more. What's the word? We were just kind of naughty kids, really. Yeah, so just getting in trouble a lot. and my older brother kind of, really tugging. Yeah.
The reason I'm playing around with this is I'm fascinated by the way we build up the stories in our lives and how fun it can be to go and find a little thing that didn't make its way into one of the hero's stories as we curated ourselves, but actually sometimes it unlocks something that was really true in us, but we kind of just didn't have a chance to talk about for a long time. I'm just reminded now of the way in which we met, and it's so nice to actually be making some digital content with you, because that is the gift of the internet, is the way in which I found you in the first place about 5 or 6 years ago. Through the blessed algorithms of Spotify, I found your song Colour and just thought to myself, who writes a song like this? It's so beautiful, but so boldly simple, drawing me into the most primal gives a sense of cavemanness, which is not quite what I mean, but primary connection with life. Colour in my life makes me happy, colour in my life brings me joy, and other lyrics to that effect. And I just thought, this seems unusual to me. I see so many, I love music, I love listening to so many different songs, but rarely do I see something so pure and, as I say, bringing you back to the source almost. So I thought, I need to find out who that person is. So I started stalking you up, and I think I found you on Facebook, and then I messaged you on Facebook, and I was like, I love you, I love this song, can we talk? And then we jumped on the phone, didn't we?
I remember, I was doing some work at a university, at the university near me, and
Bristol, awesome.
Bath,
Bath.
So nearby Southwest, and I was really taken just by how bold and like, when you get into a conversation and it's like, there's no like formal start to the conversation. It's just like we're in a conversation.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They just felt like that, and then you turned up at my house.
That's right. And with George and Hazel in the Swell bus, the bus that we had converted together, and we had grand ambitions for that trip. We were going Norway, down to Florence. We were going to the Agora in Greece, and then COVID hit like a bullet train, and we barely made it. I mean, Radstock, your hometown or current town, is as far as we managed to make it. Really, it was basically a trip to come and see you, Pete. In the end,
and the kind of embryos of a studio.
Well, what a night that was, because it was the Wild West. We came to meet you, and obviously you don't know us from Adam, and we shaking hands and hi, and are these guys safe, or should I let them in my house? And we went down to you'd built the shell of your studio in the garden, down this beautiful sort of gradiented garden. Then we stayed and we listened to Prince records and a whole array. I've got the picture somewhere of all these different records that we listened to, and drank probably too much red wine, and I imagine some whiskey as well.
There was nothing in there apart from OSB, wood, and a record player, wasn't it?
Yes,
we literally. I bought the record player.
We were just, and I think as we inhabited that space, because obviously it was a workshop for you at the time, before you got it into being what is inevitably now a gorgeous studio, which I can't wait to come back and see. But we sort of laid down on the ground and looked up at the roof and thinking, wow, this is really high up. And I think I seem to remember something about you saying, I haven't really looked at it from this perspective before, which I also enjoyed that we could bring for a moment for you.
I mean, I was right in the thick of building it, so the building projects in the last few years, you just get headlong into it and you can't see the wood for the trees, really. So it was really nice actually to pause and actually look and take stock of where I was at, and I don't do that enough. I don't do that enough with all kinds of things. It's like a part of enjoying the process, rather than being completely transfixed on I've got to get to the outcome by a certain date or something.
And that's ultimately, I think, what friends are for, is that just bringing a slightly different perspective on the journey that you're going through anyway. It's like, I'm on this path going this way, and then other people come around and they're like, yeah, that's cool, I'm not trying to change anything, but have you seen it from here, or have you can I add this flavor, and you gave us a lot that night, but I'm glad that we left you with some slightly different perspective on it. But that wasn't the end of the journey. For me, it's only just evolved and become more exciting from there, because I then took your record home and I've had it on my, not mantelpiece, but sort of thing under the telly ever since. And then I got engaged to the lovely Chloe, and we had ended up listening to your music quite a bit. And then when it came to figuring out a song to walk down the aisle to, she was like, I want to walk down the aisle to A Mix of Colour, which was just, and then I was so great. It was so amazing. And I messaged you about it, and hopefully you enjoyed that.
It's an amazing thing when a song takes on like a life of its own. And that song, You said earlier, who writes a song like Colour? I don't know who writes a song like
Yeah.
Colour. But it's like something that happened in literally an hour of a day.
It was quite different to a lot of the other music that you do make, in the way that, as you were saying earlier, I can see that it just came to you or came through you, maybe, rather than you sitting down to write it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's how I see it. It often doesn't feel like my song. And I guess maybe some of it's about looking outwards, looking at the world, and there's a kind of, I don't know whether you'd call it like an extroversion about that song, and then naturally, like a lot of people who write songs, so much of what I write is inward looking, or it's a relational thing or something. I mean, it's very rare that a song just lands in your lap like that. And I've had people message me saying, we played this at the birth of our child, or
Wow.
or a good friend of mine played it at the as his father-in-law was dying. So it's this thing that happened to me or with me in that moment of time. It's just found its way into all these other situations, other people's lives, and people contact me about it on occasion. And yeah, I'll be honest, I never quite know what to say. I don't really know what to say.
I wonder if the conciseness almost of it gives room for other people who listen to it to feel that they're not being told too much by the author. There's room for their feelings as well.
It's just such a simple feeling as well, It's just a feeling that I guess we have. I would hope that most people have it often, of that thing of the first day of spring, or just doing something awesome with your mates out in nature or whatever it is, and that was what it was for me. It was just a moment in time, and it was looking out a window on this amazing panorama in a small house that we used to rent in a village. I'll send you the picture. Actually,
Yeah,
I found it recently.
Oh, wow.
And that was it.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, am extremely thankful for you writing that song. And then when you said that you would be able to make time to come and play at our wedding festival here on the land, and you would come and let us dance to it live, that was just like the fulfillment of our introductory story. And it was I couldn't ask for more. It was the biggest treat in the world. So from me and Chloe, we're delighted about that, and so pleased to have you back again and start talking about new things as well.
Yeah, I've got some great shots of the kids on tractors and in all the pockets of your land. This place, isn't it? You build a place like this, and it's a place for people to come and share all of this wonderment, I guess, and that's what we want for our kids,
Well,
to be out in these kind of spaces is special, isn't it, for a kid?
Yeah, definitely. It's days like that make all of the work that goes into producing this place worth it, because we're living life together here, and use new memories. It's new Pedalo memories. It's that kind of stuff that you might not even recall for 10 years, but then you're like, oh yeah, that was nice, that place. Everyone seemed happy and chilled there, and that's what I think what we all probably want for our kids, is that kind of adventure and safety as well, that kind of playfulness that comes from that. Tell us about this sound that you've brought. What is your favourite sound that you brought today?
Yeah, I mean, very hard to say a favourite, but I have chosen a sound.
How did you go about it then?
I didn't think about it too much.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if I was to overthink it, I'd probably go through my full history and stuff. And I'm the kind of person I've disappeared into lots of different styles of music, and I've sung from a really early age and played instruments from a really early age, and so it could be so many different things. But it's just something that I've revisited recently that I haven't really. It's a style of music and a group of people I haven't connected with for a good few years, and it's the allure that I very first felt, and always have felt since, to West Africa, West African music, and particularly the instrument called the kora, which I don't know if you know.
I don't, but let's listen to it and then tell us more after.
Yeah.
there's lots I could say, but tell us why do you love that sound?
Good question. I think there's something completely transcendental about the tone, the bell-like quality of a string being struck with a thumb or a finger, in the way that these guys do it. I mean, they have magic in their fingers, and they'll be learning this since they were kind of this high, In fact, that's a father and son playing together.
Really?
Yeah. Tumani Diabate is what we probably would call a griot, who's that's the French name for a cultural ambassador of music, and there are certain families, and it's kind of 5 main surnames in West Africa who are considered, like, by birthright, are their purpose is to pass on the stories and the culture of their people. I think he can trace his family back something like 70 generations or something. Something crazy, or 70 kora players kind of back or something. And so the meaning for them when they're playing this music is well, it's going to be different to the meaning that when they're singing and when they're recounting these kind of stories. I mean, I don't know what they're talking about, but I'm hearing and I'm feeling an emotion. And I mean, that song, the name of that song is Lampedusa, which is an island in the Mediterranean where there've been deaths from people actually talking about the very first thing, strangely, that we spoke about crossing continents, crossing oceans. So that song is a kind of lament, or a song in memory of people who have died trying to get to Europe from Africa. So, and I think you could probably hear that lament in some of the kind of music as well.
Yeah, there was lots of feeling, and that first time where the sort of flutter came in, like a run, it just was really surprising. Took me back, and it's full of life. But the range of feeling was there in that song for me.
Yeah, it's amazing the way that they play those flourishes and the way they articulate on the instrument, which is so different to my Western kind of ears. It's changed the way I do. It's changed the way I play guitar. It's changed the way I play.
What is a kora?
So a kora is a 21-stringed instrument based on a gourd, so a pumpkin essentially, with a trunk coming out of it, and the strings are attached along the length of the trunk, and they come to rest on a bridge which is elevated kind of yay high from the front skin of the gourd, because you have an animal hide over the gourd.
So I'm picturing a banjo made out of a pumpkin with a rustic neck.
The difference being that they play it sat on their lap, and there's 2 handles, I guess you would say, and the strings are plucked with the thumb and the finger. So they're only using
like
these
an
2.
Xbox controller kind of thing.
Picture that
kind of thing. A little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously,
and they sit the gourd.
Horribly reductive to say such a thing, but so they sit with it forward, both hands active.
So thumbs and fingers.
Wow.
And then they play the bass line with one thumb.
It's made out of a vegetable.
Yeah, I mean it's like the strings, I guess, originally would have been gut.
Wow.
But I think they use fishing wire mostly these days. They would be tuned with little coils of leather. So yes, it's all in one time. It's like an incredibly simple idea, but an incredibly beautiful bit of craftsmanship.
And so connected, sitting here on the farm, hopefully we'll grow pumpkins this year, to think about making music directly from the nutrients that you want to feed your bodies with, kind of reconnects the idea a bit more that sound can be good for you, or, in the sense of, you know what I mean? If there's nutrients in that pumpkin that you want to consume materially into your body, it kind of isn't as big a leap to believe that the sound that comes off that can also be ingested by your body and appreciated and make a difference, metaphorically at least.
It's an amazing thing to think that that's all coming from the land, isn't it? I think going back to the sound. I mean, it's a sound that I hear in the guitar and other instruments, other stringed instruments. But I think it's something particularly beautiful about the way that they hear melody, play melody, and rhythm. I mean, I've learned so much from working with those people because the rhythms are unique and different. And sound different to me. The melodies, the way that you would communicate as a player. You know, we don't think in conventional. They don't think in conventional box of chords and structures like a song. It's so much more about a communication and a response to somebody else, rather than there being a script or a score or something. You know, and that was massively liberating for me.
So that's almost like a whole paradigm of thinking behind the music that you've also appreciated from them, as well as the technical side of what happens when you've got 21 strings and things like that, which is different to the instruments that are readily available here.
I haven't really quizzed him, I don't think, much about this stuff, you know, but I'd be
if you do record it and send it over to me.
or maybe we'll just get him to come and speak to you.
Bring him down, that would be great. That would be a lovely development. That would be wonderful. I'd love that. I think it's time for a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Mind if I stick the kettle on?
Go for it. What kind of tea are we drinking?
That's a very good question.
This looks like it might be a kind of green tea kind of affair.
What I found myself doing last time with my dad was asking him which of the tea bags we wanted to use, and then deciding to choose two of them to make our own concoction.
Oh, okay.
And then evaluate the merits of said concoction. So here we've got a Tea Pig's chamomile flowers. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar?
Yeah.
We've got a green tea, as you mentioned, and we've got a lemon and honey and ginger infusion. So I'm going to ask you to pick the two that you want to stick into our alchemical concoction pot.
I would probably go with the two more floral, so the chamomile and that. But actually, I think you've chosen three things that could probably go quite well together.
Well,
you haven't gone for anything really yucky. Do you know what I mean? Like
well, I tried to go. I grabbed everything I could from the cupboards here at the farm and at home. That wasn't too. They were still quite pure. Still, like it was one thing rather than they've already mashed in 10 things together to give you some
like
detox
a licorice
tea.
And peppermint or something.
Well, I've seen that one before, but so that's the only thing. I didn't try to make it good. So I've put in the green and the chamomile.
Okay,
hopefully in the summer we'll be able to pick one of the ingredients out from the market garden and put them in, quite experimental on the fly. But I like this idea. I did it with my dad sort of almost accidentally and thought, you know what, I think this is a nice little thing to be doing with friends when they come.
It's like, what do you call it? What's the thing? Cocktail making. What do you call? There's like a thing, isn't it? It's not
not a sommelier, but
no. It's like mixing and blending.
A mixologist.
Mixologist, yeah.
That's one of the words, at least.
Yeah, a tea mixologist. I don't think I've come across a tea mixologist, but there
might be good reasons for that, Pete. It might be a.
We'll see. We'll see.
We're looking for some honest reviews here. We got away with it last time. It was quite nice, actually.
I think it's gonna. I mean, it looks on the surface of it. It looks like it's gonna work. We'll see.
Before we go on and get into the depths of really grilling you about listening itself, let's try this tea. So we've gone green tea, mixed.
Good colour.
Good earthy tones. We've gone green tea mixed with chamomile leaves, chamomile flowers.
Smells good.
All right, hang on. Let's do it together. Cheers. Could be too hot, couldn't it? Could be a tongue burner.
Oh, yeah.
I've got no problems there.
No, that's perfect. And you can taste both things.
You can, because you're a man of great taste, but let me try again. Yeah.
The chamomile is definitely taking a bit of precedence for me. But yeah, I can taste the green tea for sure.
There is a base there, isn't there? Yeah. This is 2 out of 2, I think.
Maybe there's a new tea bag. Maybe there's a new business.
A new mixology,
Yeah.
makeyourownteabags.com. Going back to the instrument, sorry, just this is a kind of a reasonably connected point. This as an instrument of this moment, because it's takes 3 cups worth, it's 0.8 of a litre, and it's a shared experience. We put 2 bags in there because we're sharing the one pot. It does lead to a completely different way of thinking and trialing things. I would never have come up with that silly experiment if we were just doing individualistic tea bags and, you know, just pouring the kettle in. It just wouldn't. It's this tool. And Buckminster Fuller said, you know, I always get the quote slightly wrong, but essentially you can't change the way people think, but what you can do is give someone a new tool, and that tool will change the way that they think, the way they interact with it as a user interface. And I think something about that with the Cora that you're describing, and I'm intrigued, and we maybe would have to have your man come and sit with us and tell us more deeply, but I wonder whether the instrument itself has a affect on the culture and the people and the way they relate, because as I think about that now, I can see that that's led to us having a different kind of tea experience than the Western, even if it is solar powered, the Western kettle and individualistic tea bag.
I think it's ritual, isn't it? As soon as this, you know, you have something that we're gathering around and a thing that we're doing and a thing that we're sharing. It's like 11s or something. You know, my sister-in-law's family out in New Zealand in a kind of farming community, like clockwork every morning, they still get out the tea and the biscuits and everyone gathers around, stops working and kind of sit down and have tea together. I said, it's a really, when we're at home, probably the only time that we do this is if my mum comes round, because she doesn't drink tea she won't just have a tea bag in a cup. It's all about boiling a pot, and it makes us stop. You know, it makes me stop what I'm doing and come up, and suddenly you're suddenly you're looking at each other and communicating.
Well, as soon as the tool is for more than one person, then it starts to make you need to organise better, because it's a waste of energy if I make one pot of tea, pour for myself, and then you come in from work half an hour later, and then we do it again, and we wasted 2 halves of a tea. So I think as soon as your instrument or tool or whatever begs for a shared experience, a 2 or 3 or more, then it kind of tries to get you in sync together, doesn't it? Because that's how to make an effect, which I think more easily leads to a ritual or a shared experience, if you see what I mean, than if we're just left to our own devices, literally.
Fire is like that, isn't it? Warmth and fire. People gathering around a thing.
And I guess the fire's the same. It offers more heat than one person. You know, one fire can heat 5 people or one person. And if you've got a lack of resources, then this stuff starts to come into vision, doesn't it? Right, now we're fully teed up with our floral explosion. The heart of this conversation really is, as we said, it's all about listening. What is listening? What is it to you, at least? I don't know if you've had a chance to think about it before today, and if you haven't, it sounds like a lot of your way of doing things is about being in the moment anyway. But tell us, what does listening mean to you?
Listening happens for me in so many different ways, and it can be a background thing, or it can be focused and intense. And I mean that almost all important parts of my life, I feel like there's a song or a soundtrack attached to that thing, and it's just always been something that's accompanied me in my everyday and comforted me, I guess, at times. It's been healing at times, and that's not just music, you know. I have meditated a bit in my life. I've had periods where I've really dedicated myself to meditation. So the sound of a temple bell is a trigger. It's like it's something that allows me to access a state of mind and a way of being. It's just permeated everything that I've done and everything that I do, and also the way that being a musician and somebody that records and produces music, I've also got that thing of listening very analytically. One of the things that I've become way more conscious of is when I hear something and I will tune into it if it's something that I find kind of alluring in terms of like a musical idea or something like that. And that, I think that's a real focus of like great songwriters, as well as that consciousness to go and grab sound when you hear a sound, or it might be that you hear a sound in a different distance and you go towards that sound and you want to hear more of that sound.
I'm interested, the students, when you've been teaching, who are creative and are musical, creative, one might assume that they would be great listeners and that they would identify with this way of being, of listening. Is that your experience, or would you say that do you identify as a listener, or does that just sound bizarre?
I think it takes practice. I actually think it takes practice. If you want to listen in a certain way, for example, if you want to be able to hear in a mix of music, or a piece of music that's been recorded, to be able to hear a frequency and be able to pinpoint that frequency in order. I mean, if you're mixing, then it takes years and years of practice to be able to hear a frequency, to be able to know what to do with that frequency. So that's like, it takes a long time. But I think also just in the gathering of sounds and putting music together, I think that also takes practice. And I'm still practicing that thing now, and that's to do with, I mean, if you're arranging music and instrumentation, it's exactly the same thing. It's interesting because I mean, the students I work with is so talented, and who knows where for some of them that musical talent comes from, but the ability to be able to listen in different ways in different situations wouldn't necessarily be that, as for all of the talent and their skill, that they would be attuned to that thing. So I think it takes practice. I think like meditation, it takes practice.
I think often you do hear musicians that come from musical families, they often say something like, oh, I grew up and my parents exposed me to this and to that and to this and to that, and I lived on a farm and I heard this and it was that. And so maybe for some people who are sort of have a generational inheritance of music in some way, the listening or the palette from which they're listening from has been stretched and pulled out by somebody else. Maybe they haven't yet cultivated the sensitivity to go and seek out new, novel, interesting sounds like from West Africa, but maybe that's been offered to them because their family is talented in that way, in the sense that they've got cultivated a sensibility towards it, and can see the nuance in different sounds, and also the value in diversity and flavour of sound, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I think the nurture thing's huge. It was for me. My parents were classical musicians and they listened, exclusively to classical music. But then I don't really, I mean, I don't know. I think probably maybe my older brother, and his music taste and him bringing in other types of music into the house was probably potentially more impactful. I don't know, but that was definitely a really strong theme. In I sung in a church choir since I was 7, and so I was surrounded by music, regardless of the style or genre or whatever. It was something I was always surrounded by, and my ear, I mean, I would consider myself a sensitive person, and by that what I mean is like I'm sensitive to light, I'm sensitive to sound, touch. I just am a sensitive person. I'm probably quite emotionally sensitive too, and so's my wife, so's Kelly. And I think sometimes those things kind of go hand in hand. Like in the past, I would sleep with an eye patch and earplugs, and it's like shutting the world off.
Yeah.
Whereas some people find it really easy just to, I mean, wow. The envy I feel for people.
You're too connected to that stimulation.
Yeah, and just a very, very aware and can't filter that stuff out very, very easily. So I think that's a thing as well. That you have some young children will find some situations completely overwhelming because of sound, because they can't stop listening, they can't tune out.
To come at it from a different angle, I find you, as in conversation, to be a great listener, and often the proof of your great listening is in what you choose to say, because I can tell that you've actually parsed what I've said and included that in what you're coming up with, and sort of, it's not because I can see you nodding your head and going, it's not that kind of therapeutic evidence. It's the evidence of like, it's actually involved in what you're then speaking. Do you regard yourself as a good listener? And I guess a question is, to what extent, and probably more interestingly, to what extent do you think that's changed over time? And if anything, what do you think has helped you cultivate an ear?
Yeah.
Not just for music, but that might be part of it.
That is such a brilliant question, because I never was a good listener, and I don't think I would have considered myself that for a good part of my life, but I have learned to be, and I think some of that has come from this addiction, I guess, or desire to create, and I'm quite as you know, I'm also quite I'm quite an ideas-driven person, and I'm quite impulsive, and I'll just, I'll throw myself headlong into something, and there's really good things about that, and there's good things about that creatively, but it also means that I'm not listening to other people, because I'm on this, I'm on this quest to finish this thing, and that was me in music for a long, long time, to the point where I couldn't really collaborate. I found collaboration incredibly difficult, and I found listening to other people's ideas and taking on their ideas really difficult. And I think in my personality, probably I was also more about my ideas than other people's ideas. And I've probably had to go through a really positive experience where I hope I'm at a place where I see the other person, and I see the other person in the situation, and I value the other person's ideas, and I see the benefit of listening to other ideas and points of view, or in a musical sense, just what they can bring to the table creatively can often be a wonderful thing.
Let's get into sound, because as a musician, producer, engineer, all the other words that I'm sure you're well deserving of, there is something about sound itself, whether or not we have the ears to listen, that affects us and resonates with us. You've got this gig tonight in Brighton, which I can't wait to come to, and you'll be playing at least one song that I know and love, I Don't Want to Know by John Martin. And you can say with some confidence, and I know you're right, that you're like, you wait, it's going to get you, it's going to do something on an emotional level. And that, there's no arrogance in that. I know that's true, and I know it's true, because there's something almost mathematical, not to reduce it to maths, but there's something, you just know the way it's put together, it's going to create that response. So it's hard to form a question at the end of that, but I guess I'm interested in anything you want to share about the power of sound to affect our experience?
The project that you're going to come to see tonight, we're playing the music of John Martin, and we're playing it in a group of 6 people who every person individually and collectively, particularly individually, has a really special voice and personality on their instrument. But there's something that happened between the 6 of us when we first got in a room, kind of accidentally a few years ago, where the sum of the parts was something that has seemed to, for whatever reason, resonate on a kind of feeling level with the people that we're playing to, and I've been really taken aback by the response, which is sometimes we'll have we've just had the most amazing connection with audience people who are coming up and reliving the moments of gigs that they've seen with, of John Martin, and the connection they have to the music, but also how we're honouring the music, bringing something new, hopefully, to the music. But I mean, there's been tears and there's been just so much emotion around those gigs. And so I guess the reason we've been doing this for a few years, so the reason I was saying to you, you've got to come to the gig, you're going to really love it. I've just seen the reaction, and I can kind of qualify the reaction or why that happens, and a lot of it is to do with how special the people's voices are that are singing, and the other people that sing in the group. I'm just massive fans of. They're just really special voices.
But let's talk then about harmony, because I mean, I get goosebumps just then even talking about harmony, because I have been in so many scenarios where you see sister harmonies and 3 girls who grew up together singing, and your body just knows. It gets you. It's like it's one voice, but it calls the heavens. It's angelic, but it can't be done by people that don't know each other. And so let me just start by asking you a basic question. Like, what is harmony?
I mean, I guess there's a musical definition, and then there's probably a slightly more esoteric kind of way of thinking of it. I mean, I think it's the coming together of sounds. The thing is, harmony can be dissonant, it can be resonant, it can be dark, it can be light, but I think it's the combining of sounds. But in this context, in this project, it's the coming together of different musical personalities. We never knew this thing was going to work, but when the 4 voices come together, something fucking incredible happens.
So maybe it's not just about the familiarity of sisters' harmonies, but there's something alchemical. You've got your green tea, you've got your root ginger, and somehow you're getting something that is beautiful.
I think it might be something in the intangible kind of combination. How can you? It might be that somebody's one type of singer with one kind of voice, and then somebody comes culturally and tonally from a completely different place and they've never met before, and through this, in a similar way to how I made music with Surah and those guys, it's like I didn't know what they were playing. I'm just hearing and listening, and I'm responding to something. And sometimes that thing just happens where 2 voices or more voices can just, and that's the whole reason why we carried on doing this project, really. I mean, we never had an intention of kind of doing a quote-unquote covers project, but something incredible happens around his music, around the voices.
Sometimes you can forge a connection that transcends the frameworks. You might have different frameworks, different models, ways of doing things, but sometimes you can find a connection that even goes beyond all of that, that surprises even you, the participants.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about this project is that nobody's planned these harmonies out. We're singing and somebody's filling a gap and somebody's taking another note. In fact, the whole concert starts with something completely random, which is that we play a chord and we hold that chord, and then we each come in with random notes, and we don't know what notes we're going to be singing. And as the chords go through the sequence, we adjust, and you'll hear someone sing a note, and you're like, okay, I'm going to take that note. And it's random, and some nights, well, every night is different. And
would you say that harmony itself is a big part of your
Huge.
identity as a musician?
Yeah, harmony and chords and textures and things like that has always been something that, I mean, it probably comes from, it's in some way from like singing in a choir, I guess, but actually the stuff that I really gravitated towards after that period of singing in, singing, I guess, devotional music was, I was drawn to, well, another form of devotional music, but gospel and spirituals and things like that. And so I've always, that thing has always, I mean, it's just, it's special when, with people singing, using your human voice together with other people, coming together to create spectacular sounds, especially in church spaces, obviously, because we're just designed to be sung in and reverberate and give you the feels, but whether around a campfire or on a stage or anything, it's just a really special thing. And when you get two voices that just bang kind of connect, it's extraordinary. I still find it really extraordinary if I hear harmonies and voices that, it's just an amazing thing.
But I guess just to leave a bit of room, if there's anything more that you think you could share about harmony and why you think it's special, or what does it point to? What does harmony point to? You mentioned the word devotional. That was the other thing you talked about, devotional music. What does that mean? And what does harmony point to that words clearly struggle to get to? Because I normally don't run out of them.
I think, I mean, first of all, like when you say harmony, in a kind of musical, theoretical sense, harmony can mean just the construction of a chord on a, I will sit with people and work on harmony on the piano, and we call that harmony. And I think resonant frequency, I mean, a physicist to be able to tell you much more about how this stuff quite literally resonates with us. And I think perhaps what makes it so special in the combination of voices, more than one voice singing harmony, is when you hit something that just is a resonant frequency in combination with the human voice and the expression and the emotion and the intensity and all of those things. It can be literally overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like there are moments when I'm playing music and singing music with people where I can barely get to the end of the note because I want to burst out in tears, and that happens on the gig that we do, that we're going to be doing tonight,
So I think for today's conversation, and hopefully we'll have you back at another time and we can carry on, but I think for resonant frequency is that term, that concept, that interdisciplinary jumping off point that I can go and find somebody else. And I've had a couple of conversations, one with John Stewart Reed, who's interested in the field of cymatics, which is the visualization of sound. And hopefully we'll get him down, or another physicist who can tell us more. The other field I heard about through him the other day, which blew my mind, was Astros seismology, listening to stars.
Wow.
So that is not something I didn't know was possible. But Astros
How do you
seismology.
listen to a star?
Well, I don't know yet, and that's why I need to talk to someone about it.
It's a good song lyric. What was I going to say? This exercise that Blythe, one of the singers in John Mark Project, has done with us, it comes from a certain type of singing practice where she gets, she'll get you partner with someone and you stand behind them and you sing into their back. And then that person has got your eyes closed and you describe the sound that's coming out of this person's mouth. And often, of course, you'll get like descriptions of tone, but sometimes, and actually with certain people who just, there's a term, isn't there, for people who see one sense through another sense, and I can't remember what
synesthesia.
Synesthesia, that's right, yeah. So you'll get one person and they're hearing this note, this tone, this long held note, and they'll turn around and say, it was bright, or it was they use these kind of
Colour almost, yeah. Or
yeah, they
light.
use these metaphors that are kind of well, dull or bright, or those kinds of things. But then some people will come. It's like shapes, it's places, it's the whole spectrum of color. It's red or purple, or it's a tube, or and it's just amazing stuff that comes out. And how, I mean, going back to the resonant frequency thing, how if there's a frequency in there, or the frequency changes slightly, or the tone of the sound changes, how that can completely send you in to another place. I was thinking about that bridge. You know that famous video, the bridge film of the bridge in is it somewhere in the States, where the wind is going through this bridge, and it hits the resonant frequency of the bridge, and the bridge just starts. Have you seen that film?
No, I haven't.
It's
I need to see
absolutely
that.
mad. I mean, it looks like it's like it's not real.
Yeah, like the Matrix. Something's glitching in the Matrix.
Yeah. Like the whole world is wobbling, but this whole bridge, concrete bridge, starts going like this, and it's like that's a sound, that's a resonant, that's a frequency that is causing this, massive structure to shift. And so we know the power. I mean, that's clear evidence of the power of sounds to literally, seismic, isn't it?
Exactly.
So like the impact on us. I mean, and the possibilities, I guess.
Well, and the good and bad as well. I mean, if it has the power to, make that much difference to structure, then that has great potentiality and terrible potentiality. But I love that you've landed on Blythe's practice of singing into someone's back and asking them to describe it, because that was one of the things I felt, I guess maybe because you're a teacher and you've got that side to you as well as a creative and a inductive artist. I thought it'd be great to leave someone with something they could try, and the idea that if they can convince another wacky, open-minded mate to let them sing into their back and describe it, that might be a way of cultivating sensibility, of being able to learn more about sound. Because I know that even since being with Chloe, I've learned more about smell. It's not a strong sense for me, but as I've been paying more attention to it, because, for example, if the bins need taking out, that does not work well with her nose, and I need to get that done, and it would be better if I figured that out before letting her figure it out. So I've got a benefit now in learning to be more attuned and sensitive, and also finding language to describe that smell, that sense. But I think partly it's capability and proclivity and natural sensitivity and stuff that you've described, but partly it is a cultivation of paying attention and then finding language and developing a set of vocabulary to make it easy to reach for words, maybe borrowed from other paradigms like colours or shapes or whatever, but that's all part of it, isn't it, of cultivating a way of being.
I think learning to listen it's been huge for me, but learning to listen, like we're having a conversation now, but learning to listen in different ways to sound, in different ways to music, in different ways to words and lyrics. We talked about this a bit earlier, because when in that early part, when I was growing up in my teens, I didn't listen to lyrics. I loved the sound of music, and I loved the sound of someone's voice, even the shape of a vowel or something like that. But I was constantly mishearing lyrics and quoting lyrics, and that for me has been a massive focus of my listening. Is like so much of the meaning is in the narrative and the story of the lyrics. So I think thinking about it, learning for whatever natural listening ear, whatever I had as a kid, I used to rest and rely on that. I think I was probably a little bit lazy actually, where I just like, I can kind of do this because I can pick this up and I can play this. And I said, well, I wouldn't work on certain things, but definitely the application of learning to listen and listen in different ways has been absolutely massive to me and hugely enriching. I was learning so much now. I feel like I'm on a really steep learning curve with music production, just listening to sound and the sonic spectrum of sound because I'm mixing my own work again after not really doing it. I used to just send it to other people to do, and so I'm on a huge journey of like discovery with just learning to listen in new ways and listen more acutely and refining that skill.
I think, and it leads me on to the final question I want to ask you before we wrap up is, I think I've had a similar experience with editing my own YouTube videos because it showed me how much babble I was giving, how many ums and ahs, how much random meandering I was doing, because I then spent hours actually listening to my own voice and chopping it out and realizing that something that starts at 45 minutes ends up being 12, and you're like, I'm really taking up a lot of airtime that's unneeded, you know. But that kind of going through those creative processes can be really strong personal learning journeys, as well as helping you to craft the art that you're trying to release. It does something to you as you learn about yourself as well.
Listening to yourself. I know it's just kind of a cliche, isn't it? But you are quite literally sitting down and listening to yourself.
Yeah, it does feel a bit like a narcissistic wormhole. Ooh, that was good, Dave. Well done. I'll keep that one in.
I mean, I think it's a really, really great thing to do for performers, for musicians. There's nothing better than if you can bear to do it, you know, just record and watch and review, and it's the same thing with. I mean, this is your currency really. You speak a lot, don't you? You speak a lot in public. I don't mean you speak a lot in.
Yeah.
But you know, that's. I mean, I'm not
definitely.
If you're doing a keynote speech or something, that's really, really, really important. And in fact, one of the best therapeutic experiences I've ever had was I had some bereavement therapy for about a year with this unbelievable therapist. And the first thing he said to me was, we're going to record every word of what we're saying, and I want you to commit in between the week, you know, between when we see each other, I want you to commit to listening to that session at least once. And the fascinating thing about that for me was the way that I remembered the conversation and the things that came out, or perhaps the energy or the emotion that was coming from me so often was not the reality. Even the words and the sequence of words that I remember from that situation was different having listened to it.
Your memory of the therapy session was fictitious. You kind of reconstructed a different story, and when you watch back to the recording, you realised how different you were remembering it to be.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, to a fascinating degree. And I mean, I guess maybe it's a particular period of time, because if you're in grief or you're in shock or any of those kinds of things, then that can affect all of that as well. But I just remember feeling like, and it was almost inevitably in the positive, as in
you
when I listened
more positively.
No, so my recollection of it was negative, like I was being judgmental, or I was being angry about something, or I was being, and inevitably, almost always, it was that actually when I heard it back, I was like, I wasn't so bad.
Wow.
You know? Or that wasn't so bad.
There's a couple of things I love about that story. One is the sort of trust he has in you that if you just listen back to yourself, you will make the connections of where the gaps are. And I've entirely forgotten my other point about it all. But give us a second, we'll get back to it, won't we? So there was big gaps. It was a particular moment in your life. Well, the other thing I wanted to say about it was, even if that was quite an extreme moment where you were trying to deal with bereavement, that sense of our story getting away from us is true for absolutely everybody. The gap between what we tell the world and what's really going on, whether we mean to or not, is certainly present in me, and I think in everybody. And I love that what you got by running that process was what sounds like a more kinder understanding of yourself. You realised that you weren't maybe being as generous or as kind to yourself as you could afford to be.
Yeah, and I guess one of the themes that came out of it was to do with how harsh I generally am, and how when I'm talking about, obviously a lot of it's going to be about relationships and perhaps how you operate in those relationships. And, I'm probably just I'm like my own harshest critic kind of thing, which is quite a common thing, right? So, yeah, the misremembering thing, I guess the manner in which we misremember might relate to whatever kind of stuff we've got going on for ourselves. I mean, if I was like an egomaniac, maybe I'd remember it. remember it with me coming out like Rosie of every. Who knows? I'd be quite interested to maybe have another experience now that I'm out of that period of time, and a lot's happened since that period of time. I mean, being a parent helps you reflect. Talking of listening, being a parent, I mean, you have to listen on a whole different level to people on a whole different level. And but I guess the other thing about it is listening back to yourself in that period of time. So it's really easy in a period of time, in a week or a couple of weeks, just to forget that thing, and just to put that in a little box. And it's like, that's the thing I do. That's the thing that I do on that day for an hour, and I'm done. I've done that. I don't have to do that now and for another week. But the other great thing about that was that you're coming back and you're listening to yourself, and you're having to listen to you quite literally processing emotion in that, and feel you processing emotion.
Yes, and bringing it geographically back with you home or wherever it was that you listened to it. You couldn't leave it and lock the door and be done with that conversation. No. It gave it a slight sense of temporality, or continuing to live on.
Yeah, and I committed to listen to that stuff. That was part of our contract,
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I would love to ask you one more question, which maybe we'll get the headlines and follow up another day on it. But the question about digital and analog sound, we touched on resonant frequencies and the power to move people. I was obviously affected by your song over Spotify, but to what extent do you think that we really hear sound digitally? Is there much lost in what our body receives when we hear it through electronic means? I don't know what better questions to ask, but is this a problem? If we're interested in sound, do we need to make sure we get back to the analog if we want the most valuable healing properties of sound to affect us emotionally or physically? Is this a big deal or not a big deal? I don't know anything about what happens when we put sound through digital stuff, even these microphones right here.
Yeah. I mean, I can only talk about my experience of it. And the moment that I listened to the first album that I made, when it went onto vinyl, I played it through a record player, was definitely a different listening experience, because I was listening through a 1970s stereo with an old 1970s record deck, and there was stuff that I heard in the sound and the detail of the sound and the character of the sound that was very, very different to the digital listening experience. But that said, I mean, you're first and foremost, of course, you're always hearing the song and you're hearing the key elements of a production, and the way that we listen and the equipment that we listen on, for the most part, I'd struggle to confidently say, unless you're wanting to invest in some serious stuff. I mean, I don't think. I certainly don't have a problem with listening to stuff digitally, but I do also see the. I love analog sound, and I love tape. I love the hiss that is on a tape. I love those imperfections and artifacts that you get with analog and tape and valves and real transistors, actually working. And of course, we're in a period where we're simulating and getting very good at simulating all of those things, to the point where if we're not there already with certain things, we're not too far off almost not being able to tell the difference, I think.
Yeah. Other than with smell, we're not very good at simulating smell, but with sound and visuals, we are really good at simulating them to a level that feels quite close.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't really know. I don't know much about. Yeah, that's not something we
don't even talk about smell
interface
very
with.
often. No,
Yeah,
it's a chemical thing, and I think that's my. I'd love to talk to someone about that. What you can learn about listening through smell and chemicals, but so that's a whole different story for another day. Yeah. Is there anything else, Pete, that you want to tell us about what you're up to, or any other thoughts or questions for people about listening that might be helpful?
I guess just to revisit the idea of environment and the environment that we listen in and the way that we listen. Just a thought that I had leading up to this conversation. That I think to really feel something on the level that it was kind of made emotionally, artistically, I think I do try to commit to listening on, and I know this can be sometimes prohibitive in terms of finances and stuff like that, but the commitment that we have in terms of like giving ourselves the space and time to listen, but also not always listening on a phone or listening on a tiny speaker or something, and just trying to find ways of listening so we get the full rich experience and the full spectrum of sound. Because when I make a piece of music, I would love to think that people will hear it in its fullness, that they'll hear the bass end of the spectrum, which obviously is a thing you don't really hear.
That's true.
Yeah, and just the idea of like listening environments kind of fascinates me. Having spaces and rooms, and I mean, you're embarking on this now. I think I'm probably quite passionate about that, and that people find ways to have a rich listening experience, especially when so much care and attention and love has gone into the artistic process.
Well, it's a bit like if you made a cake and I just scooped off the top 2/3.
Yeah.
Kicked off the icing and left the biscuity base at the bottom and just sort of thought, right, I'll have that, and munched the cake. And I was like, oh, it was all right. And you're like, what? Well, you didn't eat the cake. You know, you left the icing and you left the biscuity base, and that's all part of the cake I made, you know?
It's a big part of our, as an artist, like the thought that you put into it is like, how will the listener receive this bit of music? And you're right, if you're only getting part of the experience, it's, I guess, a kind of, I just find it exciting that people would be able to listen to it in the full spectrum of sound.
But I guess it goes both ways, in the sense that we're talking about the sound that they miss on the wrong device, or not as comprehensive a device as we want them to listen to on. The other side is the ritualistic side, like you talked about over here, with if you just press go on something, you haven't invested anything in to listen to that ritualistically. And we're not talking about going to the other side of the planet necessarily to listen to your West African player, but we just took a second to have that tea, and it was different to if we just picked the tea bag and put it in. So maybe taking the record out of the bag and letting the little old analog filaments warm up is all part of something that gives value to the moment when you then finally hear the sound. And maybe that's a thought for us in our sonic lives. When everything's so accessible and easy on the phone, how do we create a little bit of experiential value for ourselves so that we really receive even something like this podcast or a song as deeply as we could? Maybe it is about walking out to a bench to sit and listen to your favorite thing, or the kind of device you play it on, or taking a minute just to rearrange the chair so it's in the right place in the room. Maybe these are the kinds of modern day rituals that we can do to help us have a slightly deeper experience in our normal lives.
Well, listening communally as well, I think is a big thing, because you mentioned that thing about ritual. And actually you hear music in a completely different way when you're listening with somebody else, because of your consciousness of that person's experience and your empathy for that person's experience. Especially if it's a piece of music you feel really passionately about, like when I played you that song,
Yeah.
part of me is thinking, what does Dave think about this song?
Yeah.
And it's making me listen in a different way. A friend of mine does this. This might be a good kind of final thing.
Yeah, please.
To an idea to put in people's head. A friend of mine does a kind of listening club with some other dads from the school where his kids go, and the way they do it is I think they do it like once a month or once a fortnight or something, and they each choose an album, and they bring the album to the group. Everybody listens to the album in its entirety, and then they chat about the experience of listening. And that is something we don't often do, and is a pretty amazing kind of communal experience, a kind of shared experience, and a coming together, and a kind of real focus on listening and on music. And
so is it one album played of an evening?
Yeah.
And then the next week, the next dad will come and play another
I
album?
can't remember whether it was weekly or month. I think it was kind of once a month or something. But they'd each choose an album.
You're putting attention onto each other as well as onto the music, aren't you? If you've chosen that, and well, it takes us back to the first time we came to your studio and sat on the floor and listened to Prince and a couple of other records that you showed us, and that said something about you. It was us listening to what you care about as well as listening to the music in your amazing space, and there's something valuable about that, getting back to the communal listening. I'm with you on that.
Something I feel like we do quite a lot. I did a lot when I was younger. I had the time and space to really exchange music, and I think as life gets busier and busier, it's kind of, I think it's quite important to make time for those things that actually could be really impactful on your health, well-being, and one of those things is listening to music and sharing music. I often hear this, people say to me, I don't really listen to new music, because I guess I don't know, we're not sharing, we don't have the time to share and listen and discover in quite the same way.
Well, let's make a point at that. Maybe even in the Polytunnel, we'll be able to get people together and intentionally listen to each other's music, whether it's their favourite songs like we brought today or something they've done themselves. I think it's a good thing to do. Pete, thank you so much for making time on your way, wiggling down on the way to Brighton to come and talk with us here. It's always a joy to talk with you on the phone, in the car, when you're here playing music on the land, in your studio, and I hope that this is just the first chapter in a long book between our families.
Thanks for having me again. I reckon we'll see you this summer for sure.
That sounds right to me. I'm excited. Let's do it. The human foot is an evolutionary masterpiece. 26 bones for natural stability, over 100 muscles, tendons and ligaments for natural strength. Hundreds of thousands of nerve endings for natural sensory feeling. Just by wearing bare footwear for 6 months, feet regain their shape, sense and strength by 60%. Embrace your human nature and get 15% off your first Vivo Barefoot order with this link.